Hello Bio, we're starting our new chapter today. We're jumping all the way from chapter 6, we're now in chapter 15. The title of this chapter is Darwin's Theory of Evolution. So this is what we're probably going to wrap up the year on, talking about the theory of evolution. So this is one of the most important concepts in biology that you need to know today. So we're going to just jump right into it, and we're going to figure out what actually evolution is and how Charles Darwin came up with this theory. And so the title of our first section is called The Puzzle of Life's Diversity. So this is kind of what sparked Charles Darwin into wanting to look at evolution, was how different all of these organisms actually were. So to start, we just first need to get a definition of what evolution is. So evolution is a process by which modern organisms have descended from ancient organisms. And actually, if you want to just make an even simpler one, evolution simply just means change. So evolution is change over time of different organisms. So the process by which modern organisms has descended from ancient organisms. And remember, we said a scientific theory. Remember, a scientific theory is simply a well-supported, testable explanation of a phenomena that have occurred in the natural world. So remember, a theory, it's not like 100% true all the time. It's just what we believe. It's been very well supported and it's very well supported and has a testable explanation. Again, so it's just something that can be tested over and over again. Again, it doesn't mean it's absolutely 100% true all the time. And so, how does all this apply to Darwin? So it first started off on what is known as the Voyage of the Beagle. So in 1831, Charles Darwin set sail from England aboard the ship known as the HMS Beagle, and it stands for Her Majesty's ship because it was from Britain, or the United Kingdom, and he began a voyage around the world. And Darwin went ashore and he collected plant and animal specimens for his collection. Again, he went to various places in the world. He didn't really even have much of a purpose. He was just kind of going along. It was almost just kind of like a vacation for him, just for him to study some things, just kind of get away from everything. And so he studied the specimens, he read the latest scientific books, and he filled many notebooks with his observations and thoughts. So again, he didn't really have any goal in mind. He just wanted to go. He was a naturalist that was just assigned to go on this voyage. And this is just kind of what he did along the way to kind of just serve his role, to serve his job. And here's just kind of the path that he took. Started, and again, went around New Zealand to Australia. Again, went around the tip of Africa. Sailed around Europe as well, around South America, and one of the most important areas of this trip, which is circled right here, is called the Galapagos Islands. And so we're going to talk about why that was important here a little bit in this section, and then we'll get into it more detailed later on when we talk about evolution more. And so what was Charles Darwin's actual contribution to science? So he's had the theory of evolution, which is kind of associated with his name, almost on kind of like a household name, if you will. So what exactly did he do? So during his travels, Darwin made numerous observations and he collected evidence that led him to propose a hypothesis about the way life changes over time. And so this hypothesis over time actually became a theory because it has been tested, it has been proven to be true, and we call this the theory of evolution. So what were these numerous observations that he made? So Darwin observed that many plants and animals were suited to environments that they inhabited. So that made sense that if you lived in trees, you had something to climb with. If you lived in water, you had fins to swim with. If you lived on land, you could have legs to help you run quickly or fly away, things like that. And he was impressed by the ways in which organisms survived and produced offspring. So that's kind of like the main goal when you're out in nature. In order to be considered successful, you have to have offspring, and your offspring need to produce offspring as well. And so he was impressed that organisms were actually able to do this. However, he was puzzled by where different species lived and did not live, so he was wondering, again, why certain organisms maybe lived in trees when maybe they looked like they could live on ground better. And kind of one example of things that he saw was that the grasslands in some regions were very similar to one another, but they were inhabited by very different animals. So I guess if we could give a real-life example, so the grasslands in Africa, which he might not have seen these, but this would just be an example. Grasslands in Africa, very different than the grasslands here in the United States in terms of animals. The plants might be very similar, but there's very different animals that live in these regions, so he wanted to know why that was the case, why wasn't it the same throughout the whole entire world. So what Darwin did was he collected and preserved the remains of ancient organisms called fossils, so he looked at fossils, and some of these fossils resembled organisms that were still alive today, so he could actually make some connections between our old non-living things into our living organisms today to see how much they change, or in some cases didn't change at all, and others had looked completely unlike any creature he had ever seen. So he looked at living organisms, he looked at fossils, and he tried to compare them to see, oh look, this one very similar to this organism that I found alive today, but this fossil, there's nothing alive that I've seen that looks like this. And so overall, just all these things that kind of led him to come to his theory of evolution. And then I mentioned this earlier, the Galapagos Islands. This is one of the biggest areas where this observation took place. So Darwin observed that the Galapagos Islands were very close together, but they had very different climates. So there were several, this is like a chain of islands, I guess you will, several different land masses that make up the Galapagos Islands, and even though they're very close together, they have very different climates. And so what patterns did he observe among the organisms of these islands? So he observed that the characteristics of many animals and plants varied noticeably among the different islands of the Galapagos. So even though they were very close together, animals were very, very different, and that's going to be kind of one of the big driving points of his data to help him come up with a theory of evolution, which we'll get into one group of animals in specific that he really used to illustrate the point of evolution. So that's it for our first section in chapter 15. Let me know if you have any questions.